Welcome to the Media Roundtable, where we explore the business of trust in the new media economy. I'm somehow your host today, Tucker Palusis of Oxford Road. Today we're going to talk about AI, but in a way that's hopefully different from the million or so other AI conversations that are out there right now. This week, in partnership with our friends at Cumulus Media Westwood One and the research firm Quantilope, we're releasing a new study on AI that tries to answer a deceptively simple question. How are everyday Americans actually using AI? And then pairing that with how does that compare to the people who market AI for a living? The results paint what the survey calls a tale of two cities. On this one side, you have marketers and media agencies who use a ton of AI and are super excited and optimistic about the possibilities. On the other side, in the other city, you have average Americans, half of whom use AI weekly, but are still pretty guarded about AI as a whole. There's another intriguing narrative in this study, one that matters a lot to this specific audience, is heavy podcast and heavy AM/FM listeners are more aware of AI brands and more frequent AI users compared to the general population. In other words, AI and podcasting and audio might be on this collision course in a way that might actually be good for our industry. We're going to dig into all of this with our guests, both of whom spent a lot of time thinking about how and why we consume media and how that impacts brand building. So first up, we have Pierre Bouvard. He's the Chief Insights Officer for Cumulus Media and Westwood One. Joining him, my colleague, Neil Lucy, EVP of Strategic Planning at Oxford Road. Pierre, Neil, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited to have you guys too. I know that this has been a long time coming. I won't spoil it with my anecdotes or any of the findings. So we'll get right into it. Pierre, I know you've put this thing together. You've had time to distill it and get in deep. Can you talk about some of the key findings from the research? And then from there, we'll kind of dig into a few more of them.
Sure. At first, I'd like to thank Connor Doyle for the inspiration to do this study. He made the comment that he suspected that marketers and media agencies saw AI and perceived the usage among average Americans to be very different. And so that was kind of what got us going. So you're right. It is the tale of two cities. Advertiser Perceptions conducted a part of a study for us that looked at usage among marketers and media agencies. And not surprisingly, they're using it a ton. Very different from average Americans who are using it some, but mostly for personal. When you look at attitudes, the reaction among marketers and brands and media agencies is euphoria. This is amazing. This is exciting. Lots of positives, lots of excitement. Everyday Americans are more guarded and more cautious. Yes, they see promise. Yes, they see opportunities, but there is a much bigger concern among average Americans. The other thing is AI brands are not mass appeal. They have a long way to go in terms of creating brand equity, awareness, interest, and consideration. But the fourth key finding is that heavy audio consumers, whether it's SiriusXM, podcasting, streaming, or radio, are very big users of AI, much more than the general marketplace. So if you're a marketer and you're a brand and you want to build awareness and interest in your AI solution or your AI product, audio is the perfect place to do it. And lastly, we looked at the B2B environment. We compared small, medium, and large businesses. And interestingly, it was mostly similarities among those three types of businesses in terms of usage and interest. What they use AI for did differ by the three types of company sizes. But also for B2B, it said there is still a long way to go to build awareness and brand equity among the various vendors or solution providers in the AI space. So those are some of the key headlines.
And you and I were talking before. We've done a few versions of this where we had an initial, I guess, like cut of the survey that led us down another path that we wanted to add to it and add to it and add to it. So it's nice to have kind of this point in time where we have so many insights that we can use and adjust to. So I think there's a lot for us to talk through here. We'll let the conversation flow as kind of like we get into specific pieces. Neil knows that when we do our all hands at Oxford Road, I like to start with an icebreaker. Most of the time they fall flat. So bear with me on this one, but I liked that there was a question in the survey that it was, how would you describe your relationship with AI? I know we could have acquaintance, friend, colleague. My favorite option was, I have a romantic relationship with AI. So to kick it off in true Oxford Road fashion, how would you describe your current relationship with AI?
Yeah, I would say definitely friend. The other option that was given was stranger,
Okay.
which is a little more like ew. And you did see like actually among like the TV audience, there was a little bit more of that guarded, stranger danger perception.
Interesting. What do you have, Neil?
I said frenemy
Frenemy.
because because in a lot of ways AI is a friend to me. I use it consistently. It's also an enemy because I review a lot of work and a lot of work that's been done with AI, and sometimes I feel like half of my job is making AI sound human or correcting sort of what AI doesn't quite get right. So it's a frenemy right now for me.
I think that's a good answer. We should have left option D right in. But I think that's probably the right one. I think I would pick work colleague and potentially frenemy, where I see, and some of the stuff I saw in the survey too, like it will save you time, but the other pitfall is it potentially reduces some creativity. So I want to spend some time maybe further down the conversation talking about some of those reasons. But Pierre, you gave us a nice overview of kind of the impetus of the study and why we commissioned it. Can you just give us like another piece of like, what were we trying to solve here, or what questions or problems were we trying to resolve, and how will this study help us get to the bottom of that?
Yeah. Well, I think one of them was, what is a good media plan if I'm a B2B brand or I'm a consumer brand to try to, reach consumers with the greatest opportunity? And 9 Ways Till Sunday, it said absolutely any form of audio is a place you need to be if you're either a B2B brand with an AI solution or you're just trying to build your brand with consumers, because the usage among heavy audio users was significantly higher than the general population. Um, the other focus was creative. If you're sitting in the industry, you are euphoric and you think this is the most amazing thing since sliced bread, but the consumer is much more cautious and guarded. And I think one of the strong recommendations is to take yourself out of your bubble, your marketing bubble, and remember that your ad should recall that people are a little anxious and concerned about this. There is, interestingly, a new book just published from Adil Kakam, former chief research officer at Odyssey. And the book is called AI for Marketing, the Consumer Perspective. And in that book, she also argues to be very careful with how you use AI in creative. And she recommends you pre-test your creative to make sure, that not only the message for the marketer lands with the consumer, but also if there are AI elements in the creative, that it doesn't set off negativity among consumers. I think the other thing that we wanted to explore was, how far along the growth of AI are we? Because if you're sitting in the industry, you think like, we are here. It's mass adoption, mass usage, mass awareness, like we've arrived. In actuality, we feel we are where the internet was in 2001. The internet was 7 years old, 6 years old at the time. And about half of America was using the internet on a weekly basis. So internet 2001, that's where AI is now. We're only at about half of Americans that are using the internet weekly. So none of us on the brand side can assume like everyone knows who we are, everyone's using it, and we've arrived. We have a ways to go in terms of consumer usage and consumer adoption. The other opportunity which we want to look at is within the enterprise at work, whether it's a small or medium or large business. And there, we're at the tip of the iceberg. Whether it's big, medium, or small companies, about a third say they're using it to some form. So really early days there. And I think a lot of opportunities to educate and teach people at work in the B2B space on, how it can help them do their job.
I like it. Well, maybe let's spend a minute on the adoption curve.
Tucker, I wanted to add a couple of things because Pierre talked about just how audio and podcasting is a great way to reach for AI companies to reach their audiences. I did a quick look at Magellan. I didn't have enough time to look at Media Radar, but the only two brands that are really doing anything of note in podcasting are Microsoft Copilot and Claude. So there's a lot of white space available for marketers, for AI marketers to reach their audiences, and it's an underutilized. Podcasting is underutilized. We know audio in general is underutilized just based on the time spent that goes to audio and the amount of ad spend that goes. And what I've seen from some of the AI companies is they've done the big brand stuff so far. They've done the big TV buys. I'm sure that when we come to the NFL this fall, we'll probably see a lot of Claude, probably a lot of ChatGPT, but there are other ways to reach your audiences than just buying the big brand stuff.
Well, I think that's really interesting. I mean, do you guys want to drill in on that?
Yeah, one of the points about TV is that there's a reflexive concept that, if I need to build a brand, I need to be on TV. And that's a wonderful 1993 concept when there were people under the age of 60 watching TV. But right now, TV is what's playing in God's waiting room. It skews old. And the people that you're reaching on TV are not into AI, far less interested, don't want to learn about it, and are very not the people that are in the category, so to speak. So I would caution a marketer against heavy linear TV because you are pounding people that have little interest in the category in general. Why is audio so much better of a place? Audio is the soundtrack of the American worker. Whether you're a podcast listener, Sirius XM, satellite radio, audio streaming, or radio, you are employed. And you have big households full of kids that buy a lot of stuff. And so new technology or new concepts that save time, that help you out, are interesting and useful to these busy workers with big households. So I think that's probably why audio is such a better fit for an AI marketer.
So I see why it's a fit. Why do you think that they're more enthusiastic about it?
I think it's because they're busy. When you think about people that work and they have children, e-commerce, if you go back to, the very first Amazon Prime Day, 2015, radio blew the doors out for that very first Amazon Prime Day. Why? It was a time saver. E-commerce helps busy people get stuff done. And I think that's the same, when you look at what are the characteristics that AI helps you with? Save time. So busy, heavy audio consumers with bigger households and kids and jobs, that's why they're intrigued with AI. They see it as a time saver.
I might disagree with Pierre a little bit on TV and its role. I agree broadly that TV isn't what it used to be, but I think there are places in television, and is mostly right now in live sports, that are very effective at building brands. And then the one thing I'm thinking about with television is more broadly TV/CTV and the ability to kind of build a program that reaches across audiences. There's no question that TV skews older. So if you're just doing the big brand stuff on TV and then you're sprinkling on some cable, that doesn't work anymore. You have to have a more well-rounded media plan than that.
And you mentioned sports. One of the things we did a deep dive in this study on were folks that are frequent listeners to sports podcasts or sports on the radio, and their usage of AI and interest was very, very high. One of the interesting things about sports on TV and sports on radio, when you look at MRI Simmons and you consider sports engagement, how would you define sports engagement? Go to live games, participate in fantasy sports. People consider you a sports expert. You have a sports app on your phone, like a whole variety of like passion. The audio sports consumer is twice as likely to do any of those sports oriented things. So the sports TV viewer is very much your grandfather, lean back, playing in the other room. It happens to be there. The intense sports fan who is really into it and does sports betting, fantasy sports, goes to games, they're listening to sports podcasts and they're listening to sports on the radio. So yes, sports is a great place to be, but to really get the high engagement, high passion sports consumer, you'll find them on audio.
I like it. Okay, so this might be a little bit of a diversion, but as I was looking through some of the results, I felt like I was bumping up against maybe an opportunity for us to do a little myth busting. Like I hear heavy AM/FM listeners, which I think in my head might skew a little bit older than some of the other channels, maybe not as old as TV, but then high adoption and usage rates for AI. But then everything I hear, at least in my feeds, is AI is a young person using ChatGPT in college. So like, how should I square up maybe slightly older, but then also correlating to the higher usage of AI?
Pierre, can I jump in a little bit? Because I think that this is something that you and I have touched on in different ways. And that is, Tucker, you're not the consumer. And so I think that we often put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer, and we project our own media consumption as what the average person does, or how they consume media. I know, Pierre, you've talked a lot about it in the studies you've done. I mean, I take a look at FM radio. Everybody, if I talk to marketers, I don't listen to radio. Doesn't exist for me anymore. And then I look at the data, and the data shows that plenty of people are still listening to radio, and it's basically the average US age for FM. So AM does skew older, there's no question, but FM is basically spot on to the US average age for adults.
Yeah, and interestingly, podcast, which for years and years had a median age of about 34, the usage of podcasts have exploded among folks 35, 64. That's the fastest growing demo for podcasts. So now the median age of podcasts has ticked up to 39. So but that's a sign of how mass appeal, podcasts have become. Yes, college kids are using ChatGPT, to write their papers, much to the annoyance of the professors. But we did see a lot of personal use throughout this study of AI. And I think one of the biggest things is the Google summaries, where everyday people go into Google and ask a question and are expecting to get a bunch of blue links. And now are seeing this wonderful, here's your answer. What do I do in Cancun? Instead of like, all these links. Now they have, here's your itinerary. So, everyday people just doing regular searches on Google are starting to see AI in action and see how amazing it is. As somebody once said to me, I'm using Al. And I was like, oh, you mean AI? Okay. Now, what this is doing, though, is that the search volume for websites of all manner is going down. It's down dramatically because people are getting their answers from these AI summaries. And there's been a lot recently written that we used to just kind of feed the Google search machine and we could sit back and it would bring us lots of great people to our website, but that's not happening as much anymore. And as one marketing guru said, if you don't have a brand, AI will crush you. That if there ever was a moment where businesses need to create a brand, and because that's what people are going to search on, you want them to search on that, now is the time.
I think that's a really important point where this conversation is more about if you are working in AI as a marketer, who are you going to? But I think what you just hit on is the larger conversation about brand building in the age of AI. So, yes. Neil, what are your thoughts on that?
I was going to put a pin on this thought because I thought we would come to it later on in the podcast. But the point of the disruption in search is real. There's a recent study done by SparkTuro that 70% of searches don't end up in a click. So you're getting your answer from the answer engine. You're getting your answer from Google, and you're not moving beyond. So that means the importance of brand then becomes that much more important. And in the short term, AI search results have been very good for Google because I think marketers are feeding those budgets, and they're spending more money to maintain what they've had. That won't always be the case.
What is your favorite podcast other than the Media Roundtable? Is it Joe Rogan, Call Her Daddy, Mel Robbins, Crime Junkie, Amy Poehler, Smartless, Pivot? What are you into? It's such an interesting dinner table topic to ask people. You learn a lot, and people are so passionate about this medium. They're so passionate about it. And where do you listen? Where do you watch? Is it YouTube? Is it Apple? Is it Spotify? You are in the center of what we do as an organization. That is our business. We are Oxford Road, and we help some of the leading brands in the world be successful advertising in these channels. We're the largest specialist that exists. We buy the most ads in this channel. So we are actually powering this industry. We buy over $500 million of ads per year for wonderful brands like Shopify, Wayfair, DraftKings, Masterclass, Chime, Quince, AG1, Mint Mobile. We're interrupting all your favorite podcasts, including not just the usual suspects, but there are thousands in the long tail that are great niche shows with really loyal audiences. And what happens is when you advertise there, the host really only gets to pick one in your category. And so if you're the first there, you can kind of lock up that relationship, that annuity, and be recommended to those audiences for years. So it's a powerful space. And it's one where we have the privilege of leading right now. We've got lots of great ways to de-risk our clients' campaigns, like our Orbit data set that's getting close to $2 billion of performance data. So we know what's going to work in advance. We also have Audiolytics, which are our proprietary ad grading system to make sure every word counts and is always getting optimized, and then de-risked through our brand safety taxonomy as well to make sure we watch out for your brand values. If you want to win in this channel, and you've got something to say, you got a product worth talking about, and you want to get into this trust economy, and you're serious about it, you really want to be a part of it over the long haul, we'd love to talk to you. OxfordRoad.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you like free stuff. It's called The Influencer, and it's free. We also have a lot of good thought pieces if you want to learn at oxfordroad.com. That is oxfordroad.com.
Pierre, I'd like to talk about really, there's two aspects of AI from a marketer's perspective. I think there's reaching consumers, and I think there's a lot of information in the report in terms of the awareness of the different AI solutions. And then there's also the B2B side, because let's face it, a lot of these AI companies are going to make their money from B2B adoption. And so there's two audiences that marketers need to reach. Can you talk a little bit about just the awareness that you saw among consumers? And then I'd like to we can get into a little bit more on the B2B side of things too.
Sure. So the consumer awareness of just the brands in general is fairly weak and vague. I think for anybody in the industry, at a marketer, one would think like everyone knows who we are. So what that says is there's a lot of room to grow in terms of creating awareness. And when it comes to creative, Adil Kakim in her book urges people focus less on the rational reasons to use my service, like speed and things like that, and focus on emotion, whether it's happiness, surprise, tear in the eye. There's a very real cost in advertising, and it's called the cost of dull. Ads that are dull, very rational, classic performance copy. You have to spend twice as much media money on a dull ad than on an ad that's interesting. So I think one of the other recommendations here from a creative standpoint to create awareness and build your brand is tap into emotion as opposed to, kind of rational, dull copy points, I think would be one recommendation. And, speaking to B2B, when we looked at the usage, it clearly reveals we're in the early days of using AI at work. While there might be a third of American workers that are using it in some form or another, there's 45% that rarely, if ever, use it. So I think lots of opportunities. Some of them are going to be sector specific or category specific to kind of create the interest to bring it in more to the day to day of somebody's job.
Yeah, I wanted to add just on the awareness side of things. There's so many different AI options out there now that in order for a brand to stand out, you really need to build awareness of your brand. The only brands that I saw in this study that really have kind of cracked a little bit of kind of that mass awareness goal are ChatGPT, kind of really the first and most well known, right? Gemini drafting off of Google, and that was about it. I mean, even Claude in this study, the study was done a little bit earlier in the year, but Claude was relatively unknown, so it's probably come up since the study was fielded. But if you're an AI brand and you think that you have most of Americans aware of you, you've got a lot of work to do.
No, think again. And one of the other things is when you have a parent company that's super famous. So if you say to somebody, Google Gemini, well, I know Google. Gemini, maybe not so much. We see the same thing when we do studies about Amazon services. You say Amazon, and then whatever comes after that, pharmacy or some people, oh yeah, I've heard of them. So definitely some of the bigger, Microsoft Copilot, they kind of have that halo from the mother brand. But absolutely, Neil, like there is a lot of work to be done in terms of brand building. And there's a new study from Google, believe it or not, and a brand tracking firm called Tracksuit that showed that if you grow your awareness, you grow your share of search, shockingly. So clearly, awareness is critical because that's what's going to get more people checking you out, being interested in you, and then ultimately lead to more customers.
I also do want to touch just a little bit on the B2B side of the equation because, I mean, time and time again, for the brands that we work with a lot of B2B advertisers, and the brands that are successful have audio and podcasts as not just a afterthought in their mix, but a priority in their mix. So there is no question with B2B audiences that they index above average, be it AM, FM listening, Sirius XM podcasting. So if you're trying to reach a B2B audience and you're not activating in those channels, then you're missing a big opportunity to grow your B2B brand.
Right. And that, CIO that you want to get in his or her ear, or people that work for him, or, major department heads that might be requesting the IT folks, they are listening to podcasts and to radio. So it's a really wonderful place to be. And if you listen to podcasts, you hear a ton of kind of enterprise IT solutions, accounting, software. I mean, there's just lots and lots of just general business software and solutions that are in, spoken word content, podcast streaming, and satellite radio.
Let's start to close it out here. I think you both have hit on some really good points. So if we boil this all down, I think we've talked a little bit about what advertisers misunderstand and how they might not be the consumer, but what would you want to leave advertisers with as the takeaway from this study?
Well, I said it earlier, but for marketers and advertisers, just remember you're not the consumer. Your behavior, what you're doing, how you're using AI is not representative of the average person. I was reminded of this very recently when I was working on a project for an airline, and just how many people have flown in the last year. You would probably think everybody, right? Because we all fly all the time. It's kind of part of what we do. And the number, the number was far lower than I expected. It was like 95 million adults have traveled in the past year by airline. So just remember that we have to put ourselves into the seat of the consumer, and not project how we consume media as an average, or how we consume advertising, because we pay much more attention to advertising than most people do. So it's just that important part of making sure that you take a step back and consider you don't represent the average, that you have to take a look at the data. The data is clear in terms of how people consume media, and it's usually a lot different than what we see in terms of what marketers and brands do.
Yeah, and so drafting on that, big takeaway is, audio should be the centerpiece of any campaign that is touching or in and around AI, just because those are heavy audio consumers, much more likely to be interested, aware of, and using AI. But getting back to Neil's point about you are not the market, one of the ways to stumble is on the creative. Because if you're coming from a place of the AI is all things positive, you would be wise to pre-test your creative, to make sure the tone is right, to make sure you're not assuming all is exciting and wonderful about AI. There's a lot of apprehension and concern about AI that I think an ad pre-test would help sniff out, because creative is 50% of sales effect. And if we're not striking the right tone or we're making assumptions, that could really hurt the effectiveness of your campaign.
Yeah, I would say that and sort of my being somewhat insular and in this space myself, and seeing how much AI has transformed what we do on a daily basis and how it has aided us to getting faster answers, more complete answers, even though sometimes I have to correct it a lot. I was surprised in the study by the level of caution by the general consumer. But then I did see additional research, I think it was done by the Morning Consult, and it basically said the same thing, that there is a lot of caution out there about AI, and that is really important for us to keep in mind. And as Pierre mentioned, as you message to consumers or you message to brands, you really have to think about the benefit and understand some of it's everybody isn't as on board with AI as you may think they are.
Yep. In her book, Adil Kakim says that the further away from a person AI gets, the more supportive they are. So if you say, how do you feel about AI being used to, research new medications? Oh, that's great. But as it comes closer to the person, like using it in your life or using it, that's where kind of the concern starts to grow.
I mean, I'd be remiss if we didn't want to hit on the trust factor of audio and podcasting and how that can help consumers. So any parting words on the trust lens from either of you?
Yeah, all of the studies that come out of Oxford Road, brand studies, et cetera, when you're looking at personality endorsements, you're not going to watch a TV newscast and watch the anchor lean in and say, my wife and I were needing a mattress. You only get that in audio, that kind of close confidant friend suggestion. And I think a lot of the fear that some of the consumers have could benefit from a well-placed audio endorsement where someone is actually using it, explaining how they used it, how it helped their business, to kind of overcome some of the trepidations that consumers have about AI.
Well said. I love it. Well, thank you, Neil. Thank you, Pierre. It was great getting to do this. I always enjoy my time. I learn a lot from you both. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to exceed in podcasting, audio, and creator media, and to use influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but edify, to build bridges across differences, and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to our agency at oxfordroad.com, subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer, and if you've got a guest or a topic, write us at info@mediaroundtable.com. And for the craft of ads themselves, go listen to Ad Infinitum, hosted by Stu Redwine, our VP of Creative Services. Thank you to Pierre and Neil and to the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.